Second ally or death rate? Which engraving do you take? In this sharpshooter guide, I'll be covering the 2 engravings for tier 1 and 2 along with the recommended builds. So what exactly is second ally and death rate then? Well, basically they are your class engravings for the sharpshooter class, which kinda shape and mold the way you play it. For example, second ally is a very consistent damage based dealer, while the death rate plays more towards a burst type, kinda like a glass cannon. Now, although both class engravings do play quite differently from one another, they do have one similarity however, which is the Hawk Identity Gauge. So, what exactly is, right, this Hawk Identity Gauge? Well, basically, you need to fill up this gauge either by entering combat or using the 3 mentioned skills above here: Dagger Slash, Moving Slash, and Blade Storm. Dagger Slash and Moving Slash both require you to hit the target and also choose the tripod Silver Master in order to gain back gauge. Now regarding Blade Storm, this skill basically has 2 tripods, which is Blade Dance and Shadow Dance. Shadow Dance gives you gauge regardless of whether you hit the target or not, and Blade Dance gives you way more gauge. However, the downside is that you would need to hit every blade that comes out from this skill. If you do not land it on the target, you do not get back any gauge at all. So it is a very high risk, high reward sort of engraving. This is something that most second ally users use because they have a lot of agility in their build. So executing the blades would be way faster than compared to a death rate user, for example. Okay, so now let's take a look at the Chaos Dungeon skill tree. So over here, Blade Storm, right? You can see that I don't take Silver Master anymore. We go with Attack Range, Thunderblade, and Blade Dance. So what this does is that it basically turns you into a Beyblade of some sort that just goes around spinning and killing everything on sight. Next one, we have Claymore Mine, which we have Quick Hands, Thunder and Lightning, and also Storm's Tremor. Storm's Tremor is pretty much your equivalent of a fan-shaped bombardment that just fries everything in front of you, and Quick Hands is, well, 15% increased attack speed. Not much other better options than that. Next we have Charging Shot. There's only one thing about Charging Shot here, and this is purely based on preference. One is Instant Explosion and the other is Precise Aim. Precise Aim or Instant Explosion, both are fine. There isn't really a right or wrong which is better or not. Just pick whichever you like and you can stick with it pretty much. So that concludes the Chaos Dungeon skill build, and now let's take a look at the second ally build, which is the build that I recommend you to go for tier 1 to 2 if you can. The stats that I would recommend you to take would be full crit and agility as a substat on your necklace. If you for some reason cannot get these stats, you can also go full agility and crit, for example. The damage would be lesser of course, but it's not to the point whereby it's detrimental to your raid. Now for the skill build, as you can see on screen, this is the one for 252 skill points, followed by 296 and then 340. As far as a rotation goes on the build, I kid you not, this class is really a face roll class. You really pretty much just throw out all of your skills as fast as you can, and that is the best way to do damage. There isn't really like a set rotation like snipe, charging shot, sharpshooter. No, you just throw everything out whenever you can. Super simple, super easy, reliable build. It's just way easier compared to death rate. Alright, so now let's talk about death rate. This one is the one that I do not recommend. It is strong in tier 3, however there are very good reasons, right, as to why it is not good in tier 1 and 2. You kind of need to think of the build like a bad in early game but good in late game sort of thing. So the reason for this is because there's tripods, right, for things like Cyber Dagger and Blade Storm, whereby you can increase the amount of gauge you gain from Silver Master and, you know, from Cyber Dagger and Blade Storm itself. So you get enough gauge before your rotation comes up. So every single time your rotation shows up, you can throw out your Hawk in order to get the 40% damage gain on your snipe, Sharpshooter, Tsunami Arrow, and Charging Shot. But in early game, right, you don't actually have enough gauge generation to do this. For you to do this in tier 1, right, from what I have tested so far, is that you would need at least a minimum of 450 specialty at 252 skill points invested. A total of 450 spec, okay? So this means that you are going to be sacrificing a lot of critical chance just to make your build stable, which in turns makes your damage lesser, right? Since you're getting lesser crits. So it is possible to run death rate, but bear in mind that there are, sacrifices that you have to make. Of course, going 450 specialty is not the only way. You can get more skill points, like for example 296. This means that you can get Cyber Dagger to level 10. And if you look at the third tripod over here, it says that it has a skill called Double Slash. What this does is that Cyber Dagger now hits twice, which means that you gain double the gauge from it. So you don't really need 450 spec if you can get 296 skill points. Or there's also options like skill runes. Getting runes, especially the richness runes, will heavily impact how you can run death rate or not. Basically, these richness runes might be a little bit troublesome to get, but if you can get them early on, there's one at Papunika as well, which is the legendary one, but that's at tier 3. But like I said, if you can get these runes or tripod levels at tier 3, then running death rate would be much better as compared to in tier 1 and 2. Nevertheless, you can still go for death rate. Just bear in mind that you have to do adequate amount of research when going for this build, or else you could end up with a very scuffed rotation. For example, like let me do like a quick replay on the screen, right, showing what would happen if you have poor stat allocation. You would end up waiting for your snipe, for example, like snipe, sharpshooter, tsunami arrow, all these skills would come off cooldown, but your hawk is not yet up, so you won't be able to get the 40% damage gain, and you either end up waiting or you throw your skills and you end up wasting the 40% bonus. So yeah, do think quite carefully. Last thing I would like to mention is that earlier on in the video, I did say that Blade Storm is able to get more gauge if you take Blade Dance, right? Although, if you do decide to take this tripod on Sharpshooter, right, for death rate in the early game, you can get back enough gauge with 450 spec or less even. However, the downside is that if you miss, or if the boss decides to jump away at any given time of the fight, you basically don't get your hawk back regardless, because this tripod heavily relies on you hitting every single blade on the boss. Missing even one or a few or two means that you get way lesser gauge from Shadow Dance, and Shadow Dance doesn't require you to hit the boss. You can just cast it and you get your gauge back. So high risk, high reward, pick your poison. Well, regardless though, if you do like death rate and you're willing to do the research and the adequate amount of testing to make it work, then yeah, go for death rate. It really isn't that bad if you know what you are doing in the early game. So yeah, I'd say just be creative and try whatever works for you. Alright, so this concludes the guide for the Hawkeye tier 1 to tier 2 release. If you have any questions, just leave a comment, I guess, yeah, I'll try to reply to them if I can. And you can also check out my Twitch. I stream, I guess, whenever I want to stream pretty much. But if you guys have any Hawkeye questions at all, Sharpshooter questions, anything related to Sharpshooter at all, feel free to ask me or, leave a comment on YouTube. I will try my best to reply to them as soon as possible. I'm kind of busy these few days, but yeah. Hope you guys enjoyed the guide, and see you next time.